Hey, everybody, welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men, where we redeem men's conversations, talk about the right things in the right ways. My name is Scott Hatfield, and I appreciate you checking out this podcast today. And if you've been tracking with us faithfully every week, honored to have you as well. If this is brand new for you, we're really glad that you checked it out. If you're looking to start a locker room group, and we mentioned this early on in the season, what we'd love for you to do is, as you're thinking about the summer and wanting to stay connected with some guys, it's really, really easy. You can take what we've been talking about, or you can go back over the last 5 years of this podcast and grab some specific podcasts and just get a bunch of dudes, and then just decide you're going to meet throughout the summer just to stay connected. It's encouraging your time with Jesus. It's good for you to connect with other guys, and so it's a great way to do that. If you want to sign up and make that an official group at Southland, we'd love for you to do that too. All you got to do is go to southland.church/groups, and you can do that. So we got a good one today, and I'll be honest with you, I've not done this very long, and I've not done this with two people, and so this is double your pleasure today.
You've done it. You've been on that side where you're not facilitating. So Vandy and you were on together with me multiple times. You want to talk about herding cats? This is you and Vandy.
This is like traffic, like running through traffic. So we'll do our best. I'll try to shut my mouth at times, but these are dudes. If you've not recognized their voices yet, you're not used to this place. But these are dudes that have a heart for Jesus, love their families well. Dudes that I love doing ministry with and would fight probably to the Anyway, I don't know if I should say that on the podcast, just in case that ever happens. Yeah. To the death.
Hey, man, we ain't got that many years left anyway. Spend them well.
Dudes that laugh well and don't take themselves too seriously. So, Locker Room, Jon Weece Scott Nickell. How we doing, fellas?
Good. I mean, what day of the week is it? Is it Wednesday?
He's been up since yesterday.
I've been up a long time. I'm
pretty fired up to be here, at least. I don't know.
Did you feel the energy there?
Yeah. Oof. Maybe today you and I are going to have to do some heavy lifting, Nickell.
So I went to have lunch, and then my lunch got interrupted, and I had to come in and have a conversation with somebody. So
did you not eat?
No. So I'm peeling. I'm peeling off that. Then we had a meeting, and I jumped into this. So I'm actually very excited to be here compared to where I've been.
Okay.
So
I got stood up this morning.
When we get to the intermittent fasting part of this conversation, he can pitch in.
Let me know.
Stomach starts growling. Hear it all. Yeah. Hey, yesterday, one of you mentioned this yesterday, so I figured I might as well get this out just because it'll come out at some point. But we were in a teaching team meeting, and we were talking about somebody else liking beef jerky, and I just said, I didn't even think. I mean, I was like, I've never had it, and you guys were like, what? And you're freaking out.
Unbelievable.
And so we did a little trip yesterday. So
I literally went home to my wife and said, she always asks me, how was your day?
Yeah.
And usually she's a little frustrated that I don't give her more detail
right.
at first. But I was excited to tell her. Is
that what you led with?
Yeah. I was excited. I was like, great. You'll never believe this. Scott Hatfield has never had beef jerky. And she reacted like I did. She was like, what? Here's what she said. She said, the guy who puts ketchup on his steak has never had beef jerky.
I know.
I said, I know.
I put something on everything.
Yeah. So we got you a Slim Jim, and we got you some Mingy,
Jack Link.
and some Jack Link. Yeah. And you like the Slim Jim the best.
Surprisingly so. I thought I was
the non-beef jerky.
Isn't that funny? What was it called? What was it called?
Smoked stick or something like that.
It was a smoked meat stick or something. It
didn't even say meat.
Sounded weird.
Yeah, it's a hot dog.
It's not. Yeah, there's nothing real in it.
Is that what it is?
With some flavor.
Just extras.
Some flavored hot dog.
Whatever hit the ground.
It's made in a lab by Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah.
Still with us.
Hey, we're going to talk about something I think is really critical for men. I think it helps us just narrow focus our attention on things. It helps us build better lives and see a lot of fruit. And so we're going to talk about these two words. Basically, the two words are healthy rhythms. And so it's around routines and habits and things like that. And some of these would be kind of weekly things or bi-weekly things or maybe monthly, whatever those things are. But I just think that that's super important because everybody's got the same amount of time, but it seems like everybody's busy. And the reality is we don't always put what's most important in first, those big rocks. And so I'm going to try to see if we can dig into some of that and see where we can go just with when it comes to our lives, just period. And there's a lot of guys that are out there that I have no doubt that are listening that struggle in an area like this or in a season of burnout, or they've been burned the candle at both ends, and it doesn't feel like life is really sustainable. And so sometimes it's just good to take a moment to go, hey, do I like the way that this is going? And is there anything that I want to change? And so maybe today will be helpful for those of you that are listening. And here's what's interesting too. Sometimes when we do that, we burn the candle at both ends, and we're not good to ourselves, and the leader will neglect themselves at times. And what happens is we end up on an island, all by ourselves. And so because of that, the enemy can have a heyday. And so that's where we're gonna go. We're talking about healthy rhythms. And so I want to start by just two passages. I'm just going to let you guys dig this out. Okay, the two different places. Proverbs 4:23. It says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." And then Ephesians 5:15 says, this is Paul, it says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity." And so as you're thinking about those two verses, again, it just kind of jumps us into the water today. But what comes to mind as you think about those two?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that come to mind. One is the Bible also says the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can figure it out, basically? And so it needs to be said, I think, at the outset that if you're not a follower of Jesus and you haven't been given a new heart, we need a new heart. So all of the things we're going to talk about are going to be out of your capability, but with Jesus, he gives us a new heart, and out of that is the wellspring of life. And so it's not just, this isn't simply just pragmatism that we're talking about.
Right.
This begins and ends with Jesus. And so if you haven't had that moment with Jesus, you haven't been baptized, you haven't surrendered your life, then that's where this conversation should start.
Sure.
Now, after that has happened, which is a big part of our audience here, there's all kinds of things we can talk about. And that's really what I think that second passage in Timothy that you referenced, that's the better question to be asking, especially as we mature as followers of Jesus. It's not always just what's right and what's wrong. You talked about some of this. What's best? Yeah. And that's wise. That's often a very different question. So you may not be necessarily doing anything that's sinful. It just may not be what's best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the end of that passage where he says, "Make the most of every opportunity, or make the best of every opportunity." So for me, it's what's in the best interest of this person in front of me. Yeah. So if it's my wife or my kids, man, how do I leverage that opportunity for their good?
Yeah.
Because I think if we are living the Jesus kind of life, it's going to be about others. And it seems so counterintuitive, but I get filled.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every time I lay my life down for someone else, I get blessed in the process, and I go to bed feeling really satisfied and content.
Yeah.
So that's my mindset going into every meeting or every opportunity is, man, how do I make this about that person?
Yeah. And it says at the end, because the days are evil, which means there's just the enemy's just after us. And you've heard that old goofy quote that says, if he can't get you to do something really crazy, he'll just keep you busy. And the days are evil. It's hard to discern sometimes what is good and what is better and what is best. And so that's where we want to go. I did a little deep dive here, and this is me talking a little bit just about how even we see rhythm and habits and intentionality from the very beginning of the creation account. And so I did a little deep dive, and I've got a lot to say here, but anytime you guys want to jump in and capitalize or dig out, feel free to. But it says Genesis 1:2, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." And then from Scripture, we see that God orders days, and he speaks into existence different things, each specific day, which I think is really, really cool. And so like with day one, light was created. He said, "Hey, let there be light," and there was light. And it came to be, and there was light and darkness, and he calls the light day and the darkness night, and then he calls it good. And then in day two, he separates the waters on the earth and the waters above the earth with sky. And it says that there was this blanket, the sky is like this blanket of gases that protects the earth's atmosphere. The water is like this greenhouse effect for growing plants and nurturing us. It protects the earth from the dangerous rays of the sun. And at the end of the second day, it says that God said it was good. And then day three, God speaks into existence dry ground and seas and plants and trees. And God creates all this suitable for mankind for sustainability of life on the planet. And he carves out different places along the earth's shore. And there's boundaries for seas and oceans and plants of every kind, grass, bushes, vines, flowers, vegetation, plant life that's created for our enjoyment and for our sustenance. And there's trees, and then there's fruit trees and nut trees and evergreens like we see all the time out in the Pacific Northwest. And then there's trees like ours that really walk in tune with the rhythm of the seasons that we have, which I think are really, really cool. And then all along, dumping oxygen into our planet, which is amazing. Trees just created on purpose and for a purpose. They testify to the creative power of God. And then at the end of that day, God says it's good. And then day 4, he speaks into existence the sun, the moon, and the stars. And, I was doing some research on this, and it's like you could get lost. There's so many different things that people say, but scientists, at least currently, as much as I've Googled, say that there are 2 trillion galaxies in the universe with 100 million stars in each galaxy. And that number changes every day because we keep getting better technology that helps us comprehend what God actually made. And this big yellow star known as the sun is our heat source, and its gravity is what holds the entire solar system together. God allows us this other thing that he gives us a nightlight at night called the moon, and it's this metronome. It creates rhythm and sustainability. It causes tides to go in and go out. It cultivates marine life in the oceans and seas. It helps us dictate time based on rotation around the sun, while all along, these nocturnal beings that stay up at night, all these different animals that you guys go hunt, are out and awake, and they're hunting and eating and providing for their
being
little
hunted.
animal. Yeah, being hunted, absolutely, yeah. And so at the end of the day, he says it's good. And then day 5, which you guys are going to get real excited about, he speaks aquatic animals into the oceans and seas and lakes and streams, and he also speaks animals that fly and that roam among the earth. And I know that you get excited about this. You just said you went hunting this morning, which is pretty awesome, way before work. But he created fish and those ugly turkeys that taste so amazing, and elk and deer, all these animals that have hooves that taste so good. And as you think about the complexity of the spectrum of animals, whether you're Nickell, who has done a lot of work in Africa and been on safari, or you're knee-deep, and we've all done this, at Hickman Creek in Nicholasville catching fish, or you're up in a tree stand somewhere here or some part of the country, or you just take your kids to a zoo or a nature reserve. We agree that on day 5, God said, it's good, And then day 6, the triune God said, let's make mankind in our image, imago Dei. And from the ground, God created Adam. From Adam, he created Eve. And day 6 is God's greatest work, his prized possessions. And he performs the first wedding on that day, which is cool. Marriage is created. And God says, hey, be fruitful and increase in number. And he's saying, go have a bunch of babies and have fun. Be good stewards of all that I've given you. He tells them to rule over, have dominion over the lands and the animal, all that he's created. And I love what God says at the end of that day. He says, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And then day 7, God finished all of his work, and he rested. And he blessed the 7th day, called it holy, and he sits back and enjoys all that he's created, and he just simply enjoys his creation. He's so intentional about how he sets up creation, and he's intentional about even what he created each day and how he built on that. Just like a good builder would put a foundation down. You don't throw the windows in first. You then begin to put scaffolding up and headers and footers and all those things, and all these things that I really don't know what I'm talking about. But that's what he does intentionally. And then after 6 days, he sits back and enjoys it, And so what strikes you guys about that? I kind of thought you were going to dive in, but I guess it was just so good.
You were preaching.
Rich.
Yeah. It's funny. The image that comes to my mind is something that I've seen my wife just spend an enormous amount of time doing, which is folding laundry. And so this might sound a little weird at first, but that whole piece speaks of the distinction between chaos and order. And in order to create order out of chaos, you have to separate things. You have to carve them up, and you have to put them in distinctive places and piles, and that brings order to your world. And so if you just think about when you go to the dryer and you pull all those clothes out and they're all just a big pile.
And they're everybody's.
What do? You take them out, you fold them, and you put them in order, and you distinguish between the things. And so that is in essence what we're trying to talk about in this podcast a little bit, is how do you bring order to the chaos of your world? Well, you better get real intentional about distinguishing and creating boundaries between things. So that's kind of the picture that hit me.
Yeah.
I just think everything was done with a purpose. Mm-hmm. Back to Scott's word of intentionality. That's the key. If you don't have intentionality going into the day is going to dictate to you what it wants you to do.
Your email.
That's right. So you have to have a plan and execute, and then be flexible within that framework.
Yeah. I mean, think about this. He could have just said everything.
Yeah.
And it would have happened. He could have said, we're just going to leave the light on. Or he could have said, hey, we're not going to spin the earth. We're not going to do that. And we don't even need the moon. I'm just going to hold it in its place, and we're all going to have the same temperature and the same lighting all the time.
Well, he did it with excellence. That's the other thing, is we look at every part of creation, we go, he wasn't lazy.
Yeah.
And then I also think it was all life-giving. It continues to give.
Yes.
So whatever we create or put our hands to, we want it to be life-giving to other people. Otherwise, it'll be draining.
Yes.
I'm sure he was tired on the seventh day, but there was also probably a deep satisfaction in him at the end of that because of the result.
Yeah.
And we want the same thing at the end of the week.
Absolutely.
And if we give ourselves to life-giving things, we'll need rest, but we'll also be satisfied.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because before this podcast started, you and I were just kind of joking, and then you walked in like, my days and evenings right now are just packed full of activity and things to do, and so I have to get this like list of what needs to be done between the hour of 4 and 5:30 this evening. Before a baseball game.
Do you want to share it?
No, because I'll start crying because it's so overwhelming.
You asked, and you asked.
Yeah, I asked, and so but at the end of these weeks, like we knew coming into this week, this is going to be a crazy week. But you have to be intentional on the front end in each day to try to make sure that it doesn't become an overwhelming amount of chaos so that you can spend that time intentionally. At the end of the day, have that good kind of tired. Go, man, hey, I helped feed a baseball team today. I got to interact with a bunch of middle school and high school boys or whatever that is. And I got to hang out on the base or, down the baseline next to some parents and rub shoulders with them. I got to serve in a community.
Yeah.
Those are you're exhausted. You get in at 11 o'clock at night, you're tired, you just want to go to bed, but it's a good kind of tired knowing that it was for others. And that's the other piece to that is like kind of what you're getting at. God created all this. He could have made us eat the same mush every day. He could have made
everything could have been green or blue.
He chose to be dynamic, and to make us dynamic in the way that we interact. It's just beautiful.
Awesome. Different tastes, different textures with food. You think about that and the enjoyment we get from
beef
that.
jerky. 3 different kinds.
Mingy Brothers.
Yeah, there's not one animal.
Yeah.
No.
But it speaks to, it's interesting how selfish I am. I'm not going to speak for you guys, but my tendency is to think about myself or to give myself to activities that I
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that I want to. I figured as much.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I didn't want to throw you in there.
He's the most humble guy. That's
right. But God's the opposite of that. He made all that for our satisfaction and our enjoyment. That to me tells me I need to become more like Him in my planning and my thinking and my execution, because part of the reason I lack satisfaction is I think too much about myself at times, and that leaves me feeling empty and tired in a non-fruitful kind of way.
Yeah. We get an opportunity to create every day. Opportunities to create in what God's given us in this kingdom, in people's lives, in our kids' lives, in our marriages, and we get to make it better, and that's the beautiful thing about all this. And so I want to start with the first big rock that I think is important. And even as I say this, it's one of those things where I think there's probably going to be some people who may go, there's got to be a secret sauce to these two, at least these two.
It's our wives. That would be the Holy Spirit and our wives.
Yeah, but as it relates to your relationship with God, I think sometimes you guys are viewed differently, and it's just because of the nature of your roles and what you do and all of that. But I want to start with that, and here's what we know about Jesus. As we look through the Scriptures, as we see the Gospels take place, we see Jesus in this rhythm of life where he is deeply connected with the Father. At times he's even going out to be alone with him in the wilderness, and then he goes back out and then he pours out his life into the people that he cares about. And so many different times along the way you'll see that, and you have to really kind of pay attention to it. But there was even multiple times where Jesus has just healed a bunch of people, and the lines have been long, and then eventually he goes out to the wilderness and he's praying and talking to God, and then he comes back, and Peter's like, "Dude, where you been? There's a line, man. This thing's happening." And he's like, "Yeah, we need to leave. We need to move on." It's as if God said, "Hey, no, we're going to keep moving," and there's some beauty in understanding that, and so. for you guys, take just a couple of minutes just to talk about what you do spiritually to connect with Jesus and to grow in your relationship with Him. And I wrote down all these things that you guys don't have in front of you, but even just a little bit about even just the simplicity of time of day, how often. And again, nobody's, hey, if you miss a day, Jesus still loves us, general amount of time that you spend, different disciplines maybe that you've had or hadn't. And we'll talk about maybe some that you don't always do all the time, but maybe periodically you touch. Whether it's journaling or worship or just being in creation, whatever that is, prayer time, those type of things. So talk a little bit about that. I don't care who jumps in goes first, but just share a little bit about that.
You hit your preach and pray job description distinction a few years back, because I think that was key.
Yeah. For me, got to a point in 2010, 2011 with our elders where I said, hey, prayer is a daily part of my life, but it needs to be a part of my job description. This place was becoming so overwhelming to me on so many different levels that I could have turned to other pastors, but when I did that, there was this sense of comparison that came into my heart, like I was really inadequate and not sufficient for the task at hand, and I needed to go to God a little bit more. And so I just asked, can I add prayer to my job description? And they said, yeah. So I'm super early in the morning kind of guy. I feel like if I can get up and get some stuff done before my family wakes up, then I've had a really productive start to the day, and it allows me to get my bearings straight. So the first couple hours of my day are just focused completely on conversation with God. And I don't say that like in a super spiritual way. It's just people email me and text me all day. And so I get all these prayer requests, and they're legitimate things like, family issues and health issues. And I don't want to just preach. Like I want all of my leadership to come out of relationship with God and relationship with people. And so as the church got bigger, that became more challenging. So I just needed more time to talk to God about those people. And it's fascinating, and some of the leadership challenges we have around here, but it's fascinating how that starting the day that way, just getting the attention off of me, sets the stage for the rest of my day. And I'm so grateful for that. So then I come upstairs, my family's waking up, I help with breakfast, and when they were little, get them to school. I drove them to school every day. Don't regret that at all. Now they're older, they're driving, they're on their own. So it's a little bit different rhythm, but I still want to connect with them right out of the gate. And then it's into the office with another set of discipline and structure.
Yeah, he had a sweet minivan he drove for all those years.
Put a lot of deer in the back. My wife was really thrilled. I've got a picture of it just covered in mud.
He said a lot of deer just in case you didn't hear us when we were laughing. So
covered in mud. I got it stuck one time. I almost went off a cliff. So bad, but survived.
I loved it, man.
So your next is it your time in the morning, like before Ray gets up? Are you also in God's Word too?
No,
you just pray.
Pray,
and then you'll get to the office, and that's when you'll get.
Yeah, I can get into that rhythm later, and then there's some exercise stuff that I do that's really regimented, and that's as important as anything else I'm doing. Like I have to do something physical to get all this stress and emotion out, and running helps me do that. And so there's very little margin or wiggle room in my day, but I kind of like it that way. And it really helps me stay focused.
Yes, it is funny, and this has happened multiple times today. Like, if I walk into his office or he'll walk into mine, we'll be looking at our phone, and it's not because we're playing,
Minesweeper.
Was that old snake game?
Hey, what's your score, man?
Right. It's because we do receive legitimate text messages, questions.
I got one right before
crisis,
we started.
Yeah, and if you sit in a meeting with any of us long enough, you'll see if we have our phones out, they'll just be lighting up. You'll see, and it creates a level of stress. And so, if you get behind that, instead of ahead of that, it really is overwhelming. It still happens to me sometimes where I get home at the end of the day and I realize I've got 12 people I still need to connect with or respond to or whatever that is. So, for me, a lot of what he's described about early morning disciplines and all that, I for whatever reason, always kind of had. I'm kind of I just, it's not because of a strength. It's actually because of a weakness. If I don't have that kind of structure in my world, I get really...
For the early morning or just...
In general. Okay. Like if my family laughs, and I mentioned it in the sermon not that long ago, I'll go on vacation and I'll immediately have to set things out, distinguish where's this, where's that, where do I go for this, how do I do that? And once I have that established, I can really rest.
Yeah.
So I have to have this morning routine wherever I go, and it can be different, but it's the routine for that place. Right. So if I go travel to speak somewhere, I
throws it off.
Yeah, and then I have to try to create some sort of a version of it. And so part of that's just out of a weakness, but also out of the urgency of when we were in Colorado. We left here in 2006. We had 2 babies. Went out there, and we're part of a church that was just growing. And I recognized real fast that this could get overwhelming and chaotic if I don't figure out how to do this without sacrificing my family on the altar of this. And so I learned pretty quickly I better get a lot of things done while my family is still in bed.
Yeah.
So that's just always been the case for me. And so I get up really, really early. And what I have historically done is I work out first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm kind of shifting that a little bit to where I'll do that once or twice a week. I'll work out really early in the morning. Now I'm trying to, when I have the opportunity, when I can go home at lunch and work out, if I can work out in the evening, I'll do it. I'm actually trying to get a little bit more sleep, which we can talk about in this conversation maybe later. But so I'd work out, and then I come into the office when it's still really, really early. And the first thing I do is sit down and read the Bible. Usually I just have a book that I'm working through. Yeah. Just started Daniel yesterday. Cool. And so finished Romans prior to that. And so I just work through a chapter. That's what I do. I read one chapter, and then I spend some time praying. And I usually just kind of try to have a structure to that time as well. And then I'm usually next stop is sermon writing. So it's usually about 30 minutes to 45 minutes of that time. So that's what it looks like.
That's good. I mean, and I'll try not to interject too much throughout this, but for me, I guess probably being a church planter without an office at one time, I did a lot of stuff out of my truck. And so, you know this about me, I'm ADD anyway, and so it's really hard for me to focus. And so I use my truck as I go sit in the back parking lot over here, and I'll crack open God's Word, and I'll pull out 4 highlighters, and I'll just, and I don't always read a chapter, but I try to read. The challenge has been for guys to read 20 minutes and read around 20 verses. And I'm underlining stuff and circling stuff, and I may look up something on my phone, just trying to make sure that I've got something. And I've been out of a season of journaling. I've enjoyed journaling, but I've kind of set it down for a moment. And then just I've got some stuff in my truck just over the visor that has different things specifically that I just want to make sure that I'm prayerful about. And so I do that. And there's something about doing that in the morning. And again, we're not trying to say that that's the only time that you do that or you can do that, but it's just helpful, I think.
Well, it's similar to working out. Like the challenge of not working out in the morning is things happen,
and you may not get
it. You may not get that time. It can get interrupted or pushed aside, or you forget about it. And so it's similar to, for me at least, with my Bible reading and prayer time. If I don't do it then, thinking I'll do it later, it may or may not happen.
Correct.
I think too, it's important to maybe acknowledge this, and we can talk a little bit about this, is having sacred spaces for each of these activities. So for me,
that's good.
I mean, we've talked a lot about this. I can't write a sermon anywhere other than my office. There's something mental about that, in the same way that I've got a similar routine when it comes to running, eating. I mean, everything's got kind of a sacred space. It's fascinating because I end up falling in love with those spaces, and I look forward to being in them. They're safe to me. And then there's memories associated with them where I've had some encounters with God and people. And so I think that's really critical in developing discipline. There's something to that.
There's something to be said about a threshold. So when you step across it, you're now in a different space, and that space is indicative of something that happens in there. And so I think there's something in us psychologically and spiritually that makes that jump when you go into that.
It's fascinating too, because I've always been like this. When I was in college, I wouldn't take my shoes off until I went to bed. And I know that sounds like really crazy, but there was something about leaving my shoes on that I was still at work. I was still, it was all worship for me. Like I had to see whatever work I was doing as some act of worship. But once I took my shoes off, I could rest. And I know that sounds crazy.
See,
but
I try to go all day without wearing shoes.
I noticed that about you. So I bring my dog in. That helps me too.
You had mentioned you moved from one discipline to the next. Is that in the morning before everybody gets here? Is that when you got
so the Bible to me is, I don't want it to become a textbook.
Correct.
And it's really challenging when you're preaching to separate that out, because I'm usually taking something apart for a sermon, putting it back together again, thinking about how to apply it to a crowd, and at the same time feeding my own heart.
Soul,
But they go together. They get married, and it's a really cool blending. And I quit worrying about that years ago.
It's funny because there were guys that used to tell us, like, don't allow your sermon preparation and your quiet time, devotional time, whatever buzzword, to don't let those bleed into each other. And I just remember struggling with that, going, well, yeah, but this is what I'm literally learning right now. So is that a bad thing?
Yeah. Well, and we've talked a lot about this too. We're preaching the sermon to ourselves before we ever deliver it to a crowd. So when I'm running, I'm chewing on that passage, I'm thinking about that passage, and that's an important part of my day too, to really metabolize it into my own head and heart, and then it becomes a lot easier to deliver it to other people. It tends to get softer because I've had it hit me. The hard edges hit me first, and I'm thinking, okay, how do I put this in front of people in a way that it blesses them? So I anymore, I don't really worry about that distinction as much.
It's really interesting with the men that I get to talk to that will talk about something they're either in their group or with Fight Club or with Locker Room or with the weekend. And what they'll do is they will have been in God's Word in a different place. Like for instance, I just finished 2 Peter this morning, and Peter's been talking about false teachers, and this is where we are. It's like, it's just cool how God orchestrates, and it's only God. That's just His economy. But talk about this question is how does that set your time in the morning? Again, we're not trying to say that you can't do it at night. By all means, if you want to do it afternoon, night.
Some people are night people,
But how does that set the tone for you guys? I mean, again, you even said too, Nickell, that if I don't get it in the morning, I may not get it. And so, but talk about how that just sets the tone for your day. You're going to serve your family. You're going to connect with people. We don't always know what comes our way. We definitely have orders to our schedules and meeting rhythms and things like that. But how does that set up the day for you?
Yeah, for me, it really genuinely makes me eager for when Jon walks in the door, when Gary walks in the door, Kim, Laura, as people start to make their way in, I'm excited to see them. I don't feel behind the 8 ball. I feel like I may be keeping you guys from what you're trying to do, but I can engage in conversations, that kind of thing. So it just helps take the edges off of me because it lowers my stress, worry, anxiety, whatever you want to call it, and it kind of sets the tone for the day that way.
Yeah, for me, it's always a sense of accomplishment. There are things I've accomplished during the course of the day. So when I go to be with my family, I feel good about being with them. I don't feel like I've neglected some other major part of my life. So, at the end of the day, I want to accomplish things for God. And, if I was working in a different line of work, I process that all the time. Like, how would my day look? And I think my rhythms would be very, very similar. Very similar. So I like work. We're wired that way together. So I like to accomplish a lot of things, and then when I'm with my family, I'm able to focus on them. Whereas, when I don't get stuff done, it really bothers me. Like, it stays with me, and I get distracted from the conversation I should be having with my wife. I should be listening a little bit better, and so I like to be able to kind of check through those things. And I probably have some kind of syndrome or something. Like, when I think about it now, like, I'm self-diagnosing as I'm sitting here.
Somebody will reach out.
Somebody will call us. What you actually have, sir. I mean, Allie can tell, like, if I'll go home for lunch on a Monday, I've been writing all morning, for hours and hours. She can tell whether that's gone well or not. If I'm like engaging and if I'm brooding, she can tell, like, it's not gone well this morning.
There's something about being in God's Word that just reminds us that, hey, this is His work, not ours. He's king, we're not. He's good, and He's so good that He would give us opportunities to partner with Him, and that's humbling. As we read God's Word, we see truth that anchors us. We're gonna deal with lies all day long from the world. We're gonna be tempted all day long from the enemy, and I think that just helps us to go, you know what? He's good. He's on the throne. Remind ourselves of the rescue mission that He's done for us. The gospel just speaks to our hearts again to remind us that, hey, hope's available for everybody, and whatever you want me to do today, I got some ideas, but you know what? There may be things that you break into. So I want to talk with you and maybe heard from you that your voice is, I recognize it. So when it comes, we're able to do that, you know.
We were talking before we came in here. My May and June is a little bit out of whack.
Yeah.
You know, I'm usually pretty disciplined with my schedule, but I overcommitted. And so for about 50 seconds yesterday, I had a little pity party for myself.
So was it when I asked you about the pre-marriage stuff?
No, you're good. Okay. But that was on my list.
I've added to both your plates.
Yeah, and so, you know, then I remembered, though, I've always tried to push through and challenge myself and do really hard things. So I know what I'm capable of, and I know the joy I'm going to have on the other side of June. Sure. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden the switch got flipped, and it was this challenge, like, bring it. Let's go after this. I'm going to chase this stuff down. So I told him I worked an extra couple hours last night because I had some margin away from my family. And now I'm good. But I know I've got to stay radically focused over the next 8 weeks, or a lot of stuff falls apart. But if I hadn't done hard things along the way and really pushed myself, I wouldn't know what I'm capable of. I like knowing what I'm capable of. And I've pushed myself too far at times and crashed, made a mess, you know. But I'm glad that along the way, God's given me hard things to try to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's lots of different practices. Fasting. You didn't eat lunch today, so you're fasting.
It's very spiritual. Not on purpose.
Accountability, being with people, memorizing scripture. There's all these different things that we do, and we may not do them every day, but they're just different additional things that happen along the way. And I guess, if anything, with prayer too, it's like sometimes I think, especially if you're newer to faith, you go, you know, I'm going to read in God's word, I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to go about my day. And it's like, what we would like to maybe challenge people to do is practice just the presence of God throughout the day, just to be mindful. And it may be just these short little prayers along the way. You know, hey, would you, they seem like they're struggling, God. Would you do something to them, or is there anything you want me to help them with? And just like when you're talking about being in meetings, how do I help that person? We end up in those places a lot. But, I mean, prayer stuff happens throughout the day. And we don't even talk about it, but we're sitting in meetings a lot where there's just, I'm sure we're all shooting up little prayers about different things, and whether that's at lead team or teaching team, or even conversations that we're having about different people. But you care to speak to just the idea that we do this throughout the day?
First 8 years I was here on staff. I did kids ministry for a good chunk of that, 6 years, and we used to teach on these specific values, and we would define them. And whenever we taught on prayer, we always define that as living in conversation with God.
That's good,
and that has stuck with me since I was 22 years old or whatever. And that is the practice and discipline I've tried to employ, is just to literally talk with God all day, every day, about whatever it is that hits my mind and hits my heart. And sometimes that's real quick. Sometimes it's a little more drawn out, but it's just all day, every day. And so I don't feel like I've said amen until I fall asleep, you know? So, and that's what I try to encourage men with, is like, that's literally how you can talk to God throughout each day. Now, does it help to have real intentional times? Sure. Yeah, of course it does. Yeah. But he's always with us, you know? So that's the way I have employed that.
Yeah. I just met with a young man whose dad died last year. And so he's just going through a tough season. I said, well, I'm going to give you something that's going to probably seem a little odd. Over the next week, as often as you can, I want you to pray prayers of gratitude, so you begin to see the good things in your life. Because right now, this overwhelming bad thing is just sucking the life and joy out of you, and rightfully so on some level. Sure. It's a significant person in his life. But I'm meeting with him tomorrow, and I can't wait to hear the follow-up. I just said, you'll be surprised if just throughout the day you focus on all the little good things. And as you focus on them, say, God, thank you for, and just quietly say it to him, and you'll be shocked at what that does to your emotional calibration throughout the rest of the day.
The other thing, I think, maybe this is unique to men, maybe it's not. Oftentimes, we don't know why we're mad. We don't know why we're sad, or we don't even know that that's what we are. We just know something's wrong. And so what I've noticed is, if I'll take a minute and go, God, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. No, you know what I am? I'm sad. Help me figure out what I'm sad about.
He starts revealing it.
It'll start revealing it. Yeah. It's really about that thing that happened yesterday.
You know, and you're taking it out on your wife or your kids, and it's like, man, why am I doing that?
Precisely.
That's really good.
And just the space of having that conversation is what I think helps get you there.
One little weird thing about me, besides the beef jerky.
One?
Yeah, there's a couple. But coming into the office, as I'm walking up the steps, since I've been in this role, or the roles that I've been in this area, I go in going, my prayer is as I'm walking up those weird steps, those awkward steps.
Yeah, they're not
They're really
synchronized.
Yeah. I just say, God, thank you for rescuing me, and thank you for inviting me into doing this. And I'm just grateful, And so whatever we got going on today, I got some ideas, but whatever you got, I'm up for it, So just thinking about that, just little checkpoints along the way. And then we'll talk about our families before maybe you're rolling in from a hard day and you're trying to process that on the way home. And then before I get out, I just want to go, God, what is it that whatever I've had, can you help me lay that down so that I can be present, with Sarah and the girls? That's super important. Let's talk about your physical bodies, okay? That's pretty important, and I think oftentimes men in leadership, men that have lots of kids, men that are stressed, they neglect. And so kind of hit eating and then exercise and then naps, sleeping. So touch eating first.
Yeah.
You preached on it about 1 million times since you've been back.
Get my email inbox ready.
You've got the draw.
Yeah, I mean, God gave us our bodies, and He wants us to honor Him with them, And so He didn't say worship our bodies. He said to worship God with our bodies.
Yeah.
And so how can I stand before God and go, what I'm doing with this should bring glory and honor to you. And so what I put in it, and what I do with it should bring glory and honor to you, which means I have 2 cliffs I can fall off of. I can get overly obsessed about everything that goes in my mouth and everything I do with my body because it's all about me.
Yeah.
Or I can just totally neglect it and claim that I'm just a really spiritual person who doesn't worry about such trivial things as their body. And both things are sinful. Yeah. And so we're always, I think, trying to fight that battle, and men find themselves like the kind of man you described who's in a leadership position or has a bunch of kids or both or whatever can tend to either neglect or just get hyper controlling, And
becomes an idol.
That's right. And so I think we have to be on guard against both of those, and we probably have natural proclivities towards both of those. People tend to assume about me that my only natural inclination is towards the obsessing side of things, when the truth is I've done both.
Yeah.
I always talk about how back when I did kids ministry here, my only day off was Thursday. We'll get into grandpa mode here. Back in the old days, my only day off was Thursday, which is the worst day off ever. There's nothing
no
to
one
do
else
on
is free.
If your wife's working,
and she was in school. Yeah. So it was like, well, what am I going to do with Thursday? I'm going to go walk around, the Arboretum 12 times or something like that. But so on Monday, after doing Wednesday night kids church, Saturday night kids church, kids choir, Sunday morning choir, Sunday night, all that kind of stuff on Monday, and I would still come into the office. My way of rewarding myself was I'd go to McDonald's, I'd get a supersized Coke, I would get a double quarter pounder, an extra supersized fry, and back then it was a 9-piece nugget.
Nice.
I would eat all that for lunch.
Yeah.
I was in my 20s and thinking I could get away with that kind of thing, and it was horrible for me, So
you were stressed,
super stressed, and didn't know that that's how I was comforting myself, And so I had to recognize that. And an interesting thing happened back then when I simply just stopped drinking Coke or soda of any kind. I immediately lost like 15 pounds. It was weird, it was in my 20s. And so just playing with that kind of stuff over the years and seeing how my body responds to eating certain things versus eating other things, what fuels me versus what hurts me is really important, because I've got to be mentally engaged. And so paying attention to that, not only mentally engaged throughout my day here, but I still want to have something left when I go home.
Absolutely.
So if I eat the way that I just want to eat, I'll be useless right now as we're sitting here. I'd be foggy.
Yeah, we're shooting this at 2.
Right.
And then bad time when you've eaten bad lunch.
Yeah, and I've got a long stretch ahead of me. I've got a long stretch ahead of me. So if I don't feed my body the way I need to, I won't be the person I need to be for those folks the rest of the day. So eating is important, and it's a discipline. Now, on the other side, and then I'll be quiet, is, man, it's if you're so hyper obsessed that you feel bad because you ate 12 tortilla chips instead of kale chips,
right?
That's something to pay attention to, and an indicator that this is becoming an idol in your life. Yeah. And so I've had to wrestle that down too, and so I get it on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, one of the things I had to factor in was just family health for me, and it was a big determining factor in how I was going to take care of myself, because my family has some histories with things that I didn't want to be flippant about. So I take
have you always been disciplined? I mean, I know that you dabble in a lot of candy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you have the metabolism of a fruit fly.
Of a 7-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I know that there's probably a lot of intention too. With
I'm careful. If you watch me, I don't eat a lot.
Right.
So I eat small amounts, and that's intentional. And I take, multivitamins, and really I'm on a real specific medicine regimen that my doctors laid out for me.
Yeah.
And I go every year. I'm really disciplined with blood work and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really important. And, I remember when my dad finally stepped away from work, and then he died really fast, and my mom didn't get to enjoy him.
Yeah.
And that was a really aha moment for me. Like, I'm not doing that to Allison. I'm just not going to do that. This role here, it's stressful. It could take me out health-wise. I'm just not going to let that be the case. I want to be able to enjoy my wife and my grandkids. And so fit and flexible are two things I talk about. We joke about it, but I want to be able to tie my shoes, pick up my grandbabies, that kind of stuff, and I want to be around for them. So I take all that stuff super seriously. And I do. It's a reward. So I have these little moments in the day.
I mean, I wasn't going to necessarily say that you have an Arby's addiction, but I have talked to you 2 times on the phone, and you were at Arby's and then going to Arby's because of Pavlov's dog talking to me.
Well, it's fascinating how if you do certain things and you allow yourself to be rewarded. And
you talk about it in sermons. I mean, you're always talking about ice cream or.
I just like how you said he dabbles in it, like it's the dark arts.
I mean,
candy.
My kids call him Candy Man. I mean, that's
fun.
That's what's funny.
Fun thing to be known for.
But it is, it's the moderation. You preached on this. You talked about how Jesus feasted
and he fasted,
and that's okay. And just being mindful of it. And you both have mentioned this idea of blood work or paying attention to your health, and it's just one of those things where guys don't typically do. And I have now, because I've got a dad that's got lots of health issues, and I'm going, I need to really pay attention to this. And so I've asked you a lot of different things and trying to figure out some of that stuff. And so I'm slowly moving in the right direction. But I was on the phone with a guy, just before I came in here from Arizona, a friend of mine, and he was saying, I just was asking him how he's doing. It's been a while, and he just said, he said, I don't work out. I'm like, oh man, really? I said, I can tell you. I mean, I'm not no guru, but I've been doing this for a little while. It's been really, really good, and tell you some stuff that I'm doing. And he said, man, it's weird. Is I'm not gonna drink, and I'm not gonna cheat on my wife, and I'm not gonna lose my crap on somebody, or I'm not gonna get into pornography, but man, I'll just eat a whole pizza, and I'll do all these things. And there's something comforting about food, and there's a quote that says, you either eat to live or live to eat. And learning for me, it's going, I need to just eat to live. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean I can't enjoy some of those things, but we're not entitled. It's not like, hey, I did. But when we got to pay attention to our emotional gauges too, because when we're high stress, there are moments, vulnerable moments, where it may not be alcohol, but you know what? It can be the same. It can be the same result, in people. So. Anyway, anything about food? We won't beat that drum too much. If not, you can go Google. Nichols had about 17 sermons on it. Exercise. Talk about that, what you guys do. And you guys, mostly, you've mentioned that you've kind of created a little bit of a different rhythm in your workout stuff. I'm all night. I do it at night. I'm a night owl. You guys are super early. I've got younger kids. I've got to get them to school. Even if I didn't work out at night, I have trouble bringing the plane down. And so I have a different rhythm, but you guys talk about what you do.
Yeah, so I run 5 days a week, and afterwards I do a little bit of like core workout, weight stuff, because there's a lot of studies around weightlifting that's really good for you. I'm obviously not a big guy by nature, so that's not my goal, is to bulk up. I want to be fit. Yeah. And so I always have these goals that I set at the beginning of every year.
Cool.
And usually they're around hunting. And it's funny how the running and the lifting doesn't have a huge bearing on what I'm doing from a hunting standpoint. But in my mind, I just want to be fit when I'm in the field.
Yeah.
And so that keeps me focused and motivated to stay out there. And then I do a lot of stretching at the end of it all, back to that point of wanting to be flexible. I just see a lot of people stiffen up, and I don't want to be that old guy that can't. Again,
stretching is important.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, it not a lot of emphasis on it, but I do those 3 things, and I do them 5 days a week. And then I don't do anything on Saturdays usually. Yeah. Saturday's my day, and then Sunday I'm around here. Yeah. But I'm burning it around here. When we're preaching, I don't know how many calories we're burning, but we're we're going through a lot. There's a lot of stress associated with that. So
your body may be standing still,
but it's weird.
It's running.
Somebody actually did a study on that once, and you actually do burn a bunch of calories when you preach. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'll walk with Allison and our dog too, and that's another great thing that I do in the evenings.
Yeah.
So I'm making sure, and I'm just active. I'm on my feet a lot, and I want to be that way.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, for me, it's been a journey. I can get a little bored, and so that's why CrossFit was such a helpful thing mostly to me for about 10 years. I did
always
that
different.
Because it was so varied and challenging, and it involved other people, and there's a competition side to it, and I'm competitive. So I did that for a long time. I ran a lot before that. Me and you ran together a lot. Lots of stories from that, you know. So I've done martial arts. I did that for a few years. I thought about getting back into that a little bit. Got a heavy bag in my barn that actually I worked out on today, you know. So I like a lot of varied stuff.
Yeah.
I'll experiment, and so it gives me a goal or a challenge. A few years ago, I did a Spartan race, you know. For the past year and a half, I really said, I'm going to try to push myself as hard as I can on weightlifting in regards to 3 specific lifts, you know, so just to see how far we can push this, you know, and it was a grind, and it was brutal and challenging mentally, physically.
But you did it.
And I did it, and I set PRs for myself and did things I probably never thought I would do, you know, and I got up to 200 pounds, to a little bit over 200 pounds, and then decided, all right, I'm done with that. So now, you know, that's why I did this walking challenge I did, and I've lost 15 pounds. And, you know, so.
Just walking an hour a day, right?
Yeah, that's what I did for the first 30 days after I was done with the whole weightlifting thing. That was great because I got to be outside, even though I did it in February. But that's another piece of my personality. Is like, let's see if I can do this in February.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I came into the office a couple times literally frozen stiff, you know, because I was out here walking around in Crosswoods neighborhood at 4 o'clock in the morning in the freezing rain. So I like to do hard things. I like to do things that mess with me.
Yeah.
And so I always have something like that going on. So I'll work out no less than 3 days a week, no more than 6. I try to make sure that. And then, if we do go on a trip or go on vacation, this has been a shift. I don't have a problem at all now not working out all week. Yeah. And the fun part is we'll go walk on the beach, and you'll realize at the end of the day, man, you've walked like 7 miles today, you know, just by walking around and stuff like that. So I just don't worry about that anymore. Yeah. But I'll always have something going on, you know. And I do love martial arts, and so that'll always be something I'll probably, to use your word, dabble in a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I started buying things just in pieces along the way, and so I've just got a small rig. I'm not in this to try to, like I said, get in the CrossFit games. I'm just in this to get well, you know. And so I've got dumbbells, and I've got bands. I bought a rower. I did it last night for an hour. I have an Aerodyne bike, which is those assault bikes, which. You know,
brutal.
Fastest way to throw up, right there, buddy.
You know, and in CrossFit you do them for short distances. And what I've learned is I started doing some research on them. And if you will just stay on it, the amount of calories that you burn, and then I'll grab my, and sometimes during that, and what I do is I get everything down. I get everybody in bed, and lunches are taken care of, dishes are taken care of, coffee's made. Everything's reset for tomorrow, and then I go out, and it's just my time. And there are times where I'll break that, and Sarah go, "Hey, you want to watch something, do something?" I'm like, "Yeah, you know." But I try to stay consistent, and I put everything in my phone so that way I know exactly. And if I didn't work out, what that was. But I've worked really, really hard this last year to really build in a habit, because I can be obsessive too. But I also know that if I'm not careful, I'll go, you know what, I'm just tired, and I'm just going, you know what, right now. We just do hard things, and so, and even if it means my workout's shorter, because I had Fight Club. I got home at 11, and I worked out until 11:45, and then I got up at 6:20 the next morning, and it's the only downside of that for me is that you're trying to bring your body down. You've gotten in the shower, you've shaved, and all that kind of stuff for the night, and so it just takes a little. But I'm not a great sleeper anyway, and we'll talk about sleep in a minute. But
great sleepers at this table.
yeah. But I think, you know, I don't want it to be an idol, but I think sometimes we discount it, and I am less about. Yes, I want to lose a little weight, and yes, I want to be in better shape, but there's a managing stress to this that I think is really important. And there's some times where I'm able to think, and I'm writing down things along the way. I'm not trying to work, but thinking about things, or just thinking about my family, and I'm praying, or I'm just listening. Sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's just something on sports, but just taking that time for yourself. And again, whether it's real early or real late or whenever that works for you, to make sure that you add this. And again, who cares if you walk or
I don't know how people handle stress who don't do something physical. Sincerely, I mean, I don't.
They have to take it out on their loved ones. There's people around them. I would think.
Yeah.
I mean,
we walked through a really hard season last summer, and I'll be honest. I mean, outside of just prayer and talking to some people, I think the only way that I did not come unglued on some stuff was just because I just tried to continue. Because if you'll manage stress in the right way, it'll help you. And if you don't, man, you just carry it, and you've said this forever, and it comes out sideways in your life.
Well, there's a real physiology to it as well. I mean, some of the calmest people you'll meet are fighters.
Right. Yeah.
And I've seen this phenomenon where peaceful, calm, kind, generous, and you put them in an octagon, and it's a different story. But part of the reason for that is because all of that aggression gets channeled for a few hours a day in the gym. And man, if you meet them in the grocery store, they're going to be the nicest people you've ever met in your life. Now, I wouldn't recommend trying to fight them in the grocery store, which happens, but there's a reason for that, because that gets offloaded. You know.
Yeah. Well, when we had little kids, my life was just stressful. And I had to figure out the right time to do that. Yeah. So I'm in a different season now where there's a little bit more flexibility. But years ago, it had to be early in the morning in the garage. That was the only place I could do it. So P90X became, my thing. And I'm glad I had that, because otherwise I think I would have taken it out on my family.
Mm-hmm. When I started working out too, this is so weird because it's a little cheesy, but I found this thing online. It was called HasFit, and it's like Heart and Soul. And it's just a guy and his wife, and it's just workouts. And so I didn't want to think about what I was going to do, but I wanted to find something different, and it was totally free. You find it on YouTube. Yeah. And so there are times where like my back is hurting, so I find these different exercises, and I'll just do 30 minutes. I'll just watch what they do, and I'll do. And so there's so much stuff that's free, and you don't have to buy a gym. I mean, just doing freaking body weight squats and push-ups and sit-ups, those things are really, really helpful. But if you can get a few of those things, stretching stuff, those are helpful, man. And I just think people don't take advantage of that. I heard someone say, it's not that you get old and stop moving. You stop moving and you get old. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, and so I'm in it's funny to look around and see people in their 40s and 50s now. And I think back to like, Wilford Brimley, he was in I remember seeing like a picture of like Brad Pitt, and they were the same age in this picture. And you're like, dude, that dude looks like his papaw, And there's something about, I think, just the idea of just really trying to take care of yourself that's important. Mm-hmm. So anyway, sleep, naps, Sabbath rest. How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I've been told by doctors and some different people I really need to sleep more. My mindset for forever after having little kids was if I can get 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, I'm fine. Yeah. Now uninterrupted, I can't control that much, but I started to notice when we had babies that were up throughout the night and things like that, like if I could get a window of 4 hours, I could still function really well. Yeah. That changes a little bit as you get older. There's this interesting dynamic where you start to need more sleep and then you start to need less sleep. And so I'm not sure where I'm at on that spectrum right now. But I try to be shutting it down if I can by 10:30, sometimes pushing 11, depending on the season that we're in. Like right now, I can't control all that. Yeah. And then I'm usually up between 4:30 and 5:30. That's kind of the range I'm giving myself. And so that's how that looks for me. Now, I will fall asleep on the sofa sometimes when Allie and I are watching a show.
That's funny.
And she'll laugh at me, that kind of thing. Or sometimes I'll get home and everybody's kind of scrambling around. I was talking to your wife about this recently back in the green room. I'll try to just set my alarm for 20 minutes. And whether I fell asleep or not,
just rested.
I'll lay there for 20 minutes. Sometimes I'll fall pretty hard asleep. Sometimes I'll just kind of be in that kind of comatose state. But she was talking about this. You'll feel better if you just do that. But if you fall asleep for a couple hours or take a big long nap, you'll feel rough the rest of the day. Right. So so I don't do that hardly ever. Yeah. But sleeping is a chore.
Yeah, you talk to my wife. She's a real big believer in 15 to 20 minute naps, and she just takes them here and there. And so I've learned to do that because I don't sleep well.
Yeah,
I don't either.
So it's important for me to catch up, and your body can catch up through those naps, and I think that's a really important rhythm to get into.
Yeah, I fall asleep pretty well, but if I wake up, I've got a problem, and I usually do.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm not good at this. I don't have anything to add. I take stuff at night, take all my medicine at night, and I think just my brain just has trouble bringing it down. I'm sure I do all the wrong things. I watch something to fall asleep so that my brain will shut off. People are like, blue lights, blue. I know, I get it.
I'll never forget sharing a hotel room with you, and you'd be like, "Man, I gotta watch something to fall asleep." I'm like, "What?"
My brain just runs.
Turn the lights off,
and I turn the light down as low as possible. So it's like, "Are you done?" So anyway, that's an area.
One of my roommates in college, the first night we're in a room, sophomore year, he goes, I hope it's okay. I listen to music to fall asleep at night. And he like turns on his clock radio. And I was like, I'll pick that clock radio up and throw it against the wall. You better find another way to fall asleep, man.
Yeah. Let's talk work-life balance. It's a big topic, a lot of tension around it. It's a struggle that men have. Why do you think that so many men struggle with work-life balance? Maybe while we spend too much time at work, or we feel pressure to do so, or there's a million things around that. But before we get into kind of the rhythms and tools and maybe some things that would be helpful for that, but why do you think men struggle with that so deeply?
Well, I mean, we're wired to find, we're told to work. Work is a good thing. It pre-existed the fall, but post-fall, one of the problems we have is we're going to experience a significant amount of frustration at work. Yeah. Also, we're going to try to find our significance through work and find our value, our identity, and our worth. Yeah. And so a lot of times that's an easier place to go to find counterfeits of that than other places. And so, man, if they'll give me a gold watch and pat me on the back and give me a bonus and a raise, and I get all this, like, if I just do these things, I get these rewards and I feel great about myself. And so in some ways, it's easier. It's way easier to do it at work than at home, where everything's way more subjective. You're dealing with personalities, people who really know you and know your, So I think a lot of times as guys, we want to lean towards where we feel like we're winning versus where we feel like we're losing. And so for men, a lot of times they're going, I win at work, but I'm losing at home, so I'll just hang out over here where I feel better about myself.
Later, to avoid. Yeah. That's good.
Avoidance. It's not just work, it's hobbies. I just see more and more men just doing everything they can to avoid their marriage and parenting. Yeah. Yep. And I get it. I mean, I'm sympathetic to it because it's hard. Marriage is hard. Parenting's hard. But the more you can invest in those relationships, the better it's going to be. And that just takes time. And you'll eventually settle into a good rhythm. I like being home now. I can remember being younger. It's like, man, it's hard to go home sometimes because it's just tough. Yeah. To Scott's point.
I think especially for Christian men, when they're not sure how to do this at home, I think it's easier because like you said, it is easier because when you do a good job at work, all they know you is for that, and then when you go home and there's things going on, there's areas where maybe they've not been addressed, or some tension or whatever. It takes a lot of work, emotional, spiritual energy, relational energy to connect with and begin to try to get around that, to get understanding and then agreement, and then to move toward some solutions together and process and have hard conversations. And so you start thinking about all that stuff. And then also the intentional things that we need to do in our kids' lives and with our spouses to pour into, to be emotionally available, to spiritually lead. They go, I don't really know how to do that, but I do know how to do this, and I'm killing it at Toyota, or I'm killing it, wherever, and it's like I'm not killing it here, and so they don't ask, and so they drift toward the things that's easier, and then all of a sudden their identity gets wrapped up in that, and man, some of the most important parts of who we are as men, at least the roles that we play, get hijacked, and so I think that's super super important. We all have heard this sermon from Andy Stanley a long time ago, Choosing to Cheat. And he talked to Christian leaders, specifically more so those who were on staff at churches, but he talked about just the toil of church work. And this, we have schedules, and we have those things, and there's certain days that we try to have off, but there are things that happen, and there are phone calls that happen, and things that don't stop, and there are times where it feels like it just everything bleeds into the days, but it is trying to figure out, how do you fight that? Because if not, everything at work will just eventually bleed into your family, and you really have nothing for them, and then you look up and you wonder why a spouse had an affair, or why there's no love, and you're just kind of numb, and your kids don't want to be around you, and you can kill it there, and man, miss it, you know. And I wrote this down. I don't know if I heard this or I just was thinking about this, but I put the definition of failure is being successful at the wrong thing. And I think you should do well at work. I think you should work hard. I think you should be lazy. And when we say cheat your work and not your home, it doesn't mean that you leave 5 hours early. It may mean that you don't stay 90 minutes later than you're supposed to that day, you know? Anything else about some of that?
Well, I mean, I think the principle is if you're going to cheat work, you know, and you've got to figure out, again, a way to delineate. So what I've been able to do for 25 years or more, you know, or less, is to be able to go, because I get up so early and get so much accomplished so early, that affords me margin in the afternoons and in the evenings, where it's now for my family, like they're more surprised if I'm not at a baseball game, more surprised if I don't get to make it to pick up one of them or whatever.
It's the exception.
It's the exception, not the rule. And so they're used to seeing me in the evenings. They're used to me being present. They're used to me being engaged. I talk about this with my men's group, and I learned this when the kids were little. Like, we moved at one point where I was way closer to this campus, right off of Boston Road, versus way down by campus. And it hit me like, I don't have enough time to shift my mindset from work to home.
There's not enough.
So I need to like take a lap or something like that. But what men need to do is to be able to, and this goes back to your sacred space piece, is to look at their home as a sacred space. And so you're crossing a threshold when you walk in there that demands and needs you to be a husband and a father, not whatever you are at work. And so if you need to pray all the way home for God to help you do that, then do that. You know,
physically set your briefcase down at the door.
Yeah,
you know,
I listen to some music sometimes, which is different than what I do when I'm going to appointments and meeting with people. I usually listen to podcasts, but at the end of the day, I change that to music. You know, so Chris Stapleton comes on in my truck, and I'm driving to the house, and it just changes my mindset. So
that's cool. Anything, buddy? You all right?
Yeah,
he's fading.
No, I'm just thinking about. I'm thinking it through. Like when I get home, you know, it's a different set of like oftentimes tasks, you know, and so I don't know. I just, for me, I love Allison so much, and I love my kids so much. I want to serve them. Like there's just this sincere desire in my heart to make their life as burden-free as possible,
as rich,
emotionally, physically, whatever it is. And you know, they've got their stuff, man. We're all coming to the same place at the same time, bringing junk. And so, you know, I don't know. I like running errands for them. I just like doing that stuff. And I used to not be that way. So God's really changed my heart, and I'm grateful for that. I don't know. I wish I could think through like how that happened. I haven't thought through the mechanics of that, but it's definitely a desire of my heart. Is like he's saying, when I get home, there's an excitement now, and I love being able to serve them the way I'm serving people here in the church. So,
any lesson out of a bad season for you where you both nodded to me? I mean, you know, I'll give you a second, but like when I left to go to Seattle, I believe that my whole life has been pointed toward this, and probably for the rest of my life. And I love lost people and all these things. And I go to all these boot camps, and I hear all these things about the planter and how important, you know, it is to try to figure out how to have sustainability and all those things. And then they say the average planter is going to gain, you know, like I said, 30 pounds, you know, in 2 years. And it's like, and it's not just that. It doesn't feel like there's enough godly people around you. You're brand new at this. You don't know. You're trying to get this. It's like starting a business in some ways. I remember feeling guilty for taking time off, and Sarah was eventually. She said, "Hey, listen, you may not be robbing us, but you're robbing you, and eventually that robs us."
Great statement.
And so I just and I'm so thankful for our church and who we are and what we do, and because there are companies that say work-life balance, we believe in it, but it's just on the wall, you know.
A lot of churches that way too.
Yeah, you know, and so is there a season for you all where you think back and go, man, this was a big lesson for me?
Well, I remember Jim Bergen saying this a lot, that one of the problems in the church world is you go to these conferences that we all went to back in the 90s and 2000s, and someone will stand on a stage who everybody knows, who's writing books and preaching at conferences, and they'll say, don't do what I did. I sacrificed my family on the altar of ministry, and I worked too hard, and I, blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, all these 20-something leaders are sitting out there going, but you're the one on the stage who's writing the books and preaching at the big church, and it's counterintuitive. And so you're saying one thing while you basically did another thing. So it teaches a weird lesson to young leaders. And so I think I fell victim to that trap of going, I don't believe you. Like, I think you're saying that because that's what you're supposed to say.
Sure.
But you're kind of winking and going, but those of you who are really tough. Those of you guys who really have the chops,
weeding out the
you guys will do what I did, not what I said. And so I think especially for the season that I was out in Colorado, and even while I was doing student ministry here, I probably was over the top because I just so desperately wanted to do a good job. That it wasn't that I wasn't physically present as much as I should be, although I'm sure that happened. But when I was home, I wasn't engaged.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we were doing 6 services a weekend at Flatirons, and I remember vividly Allie one Saturday morning telling me just to go to work. She says, go. You're not here. You're wrapped up in your sermon, which
hurts,
which stings, And so I would go in.
She'd rather not see you.
Yeah, she's like, if you're going to be here, please be helpful. But if you're not, then just go ahead and go, because then I can figure out how to operate. So my rhythm then was when I would preach, I would go in at 11:30 noon, and I wouldn't get home till after 8 on Saturday, and then we would do 3 more services Sunday morning. I'd be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I come home after those services.
You're exhausted.
And then I would wake back up to go do a Sunday night service after watching some football and being useless. And so I think I've just missed a lot, man. There are things, and Allie and I've talked about this, and it's true for her too in some regards. When the kids were super little, like I feel like I don't remember certain things with the older ones. And so part of what I think you're saying too, John, is like, I think we're arriving at this place of appreciation that I wish I would have had when I was younger. So like when Eli forgets 12 things for baseball tonight, I actually get excited that I get to take the stuff out, even though I'm like, knucklehead, you should remember your stuff.
I run to Walmart so much.
Oh, so do I.
You're
needed. That's you feel
and
needed.
I look forward to going out there and getting to see him walk to his, to the dugout and grab his pizza and barely acknowledge me, But it's like, man, if I get to choose, I'd rather be out here, So
I think the sprint collapse. And if I could describe probably the first bunch of years for me, and it wasn't just a few, it was probably double digits. Sprint collapse, sprint collapse, sprint collapse, and there's this. I've even heard people that I love and care about go, you just leave it all on the field, and it's like, yeah, well, we do, but there's tomorrow, and also these kids that I go home to that I care about, and that they need me, and and the reality is, at your job, wherever you are, and whatever you're doing, if you up and die tomorrow, here's what they're going to do. They're going to be really sorry, write a note, probably attend your service. They'll look at your job description. They'll decide what kind of changes they want to manipulate or make, and then they'll post it.
Within 72 to hours.
Yeah. But everybody at home, it's a very different scenario. And I guess I'm just trying to press in this a little bit, because I think that we think providing is, I just work really hard, and it's so much bigger than that. And we can't dump all that out today, but I just think that's really important for us to learn sustainability, and God would rest. I mean, he spoke things, and I'm not saying that it wasn't hard, because, listen, I can't create much, but he speaks things into existence, and then he chooses to rest. And I think it was not just about him going, I just want to sit back, create a lawn chair, and just check out everything. I think he went, man, I want them to know that too.
I had some aha moments years ago where I realized I'm not very good at a lot of things, and I had to get really honest with myself. People want you to do things that you just have to admit, I'm not good at that, and be okay and comfortable in your own skin. And so I'm a different kind of leader. I'm not the textbook kind of leader. I'll lead by example, but I'm going to surround myself with people and I believe in team. I've just always loved doing everything in the context of team. But man, I want to be successful at one or two things, and I want to do those one or two things really, really well.
Yeah.
And so that's always been my mindset, is keep it as simple as possible, and that's helped me stay focused and avoid a lot of the talk outside of Southland and even Lexington. I love it here. I love my family here, and I love this church. And I'm glad that I learned that early on, because when I was younger, man, I was chasing a lot of stuff. Yeah. And I think a lot of it was okay, because I was trying to figure out. Man, you don't know
who you are, what you're good at.
But I look back on it now, and if I could give any advice, and I'm careful to do this, it's the passage in James where he says, speak carefully and listen carefully.
Yeah.
And probably put listen carefully first. I think in any relational context, work context, you need to listen really well. We're not good at that as men.
Yeah.
And then speak carefully. And so in my mind, I always run it through this simple filter of, should it be said, and should it be said right now?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it doesn't even need to be said at all.
Yeah.
And that's helped me avoid a lot of conflicts in my marriage and in parenting and here at work that years ago I just felt like everybody wanted to hear me.
Yeah.
And now I realize I'm tired of hearing myself talk, and just getting honest with myself about it, I don't have a lot to offer on that, so I'm just not going to say anything until I have time to think it through. And there's probably just some wisdom that comes from making those mistakes, but also just seeking forgiveness from my wife and my kids when I mess up.
Yeah.
That was really important to me. I don't know that was always modeled for me growing up. And so I've been really quick to apologize to Allison when I need to apologize to her, and really quick to apologize to my kids. And I hope they take that away. I really do.
I mean, it's not in here, but it's like, if I ask you, what are you most proud of? I know you're proud of Southland. I love this church. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't think of a better place I'd rather be, but I know that you wouldn't say that first. Mm-mm. You wouldn't.
No, man, I love my kids.
Yeah.
And I love who I get to do all this with. I think my friendships are, when I go to bed at night, that's where I feel most rich, is just sitting here with you guys. I mean, all the guys that are helping us pull this off, I sincerely love being around all these people. And I don't have enemies in my heart, and that makes me feel really happy.
Yeah. Some rapid fire things just around this subject of work life. When you leave work, try to leave it there. Even if it means you just got to pray on the way home, just laying it down to get ready for your most important job. Limit nights out. I don't know what our number is, but I'm typically one. Every once in a while, two. There's not that pressure. Ministry is a little different game than it used to be, and I'm grateful for that. But there are always things that come up. There are always things that are going to move toward us, but trying to at least guard that. Here's a really simple, practical habit. Keep your hours. I mean, it's crazy. In ministry, I can go home after a couple of days or a day and Sarah go, "Hey, what'd you do today?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, and just knowing where I've been, and sometimes it allows me to make sure that I can follow up on something or whatever. But, we're on salary. And so, and salary workers typically work more, just the reality. And so I wonder how many people are listening. I wonder if they really know how many hours they work. And, for us, it's a minimum of 40. But you may work 40 this week, and then you may work 60 in 2 weeks. And just paying attention to that, to go, I need to back off here a little bit. That's super important. Another little thing that it's been interesting just for marriage is, if you can share a calendar with Google, you got your work calendar and you got your family stuff, so that way you can see everything. That's a show. I mean, that right there is worth this, just to go, I can see what's going on at home. It's this crazy, invention called Google Calendars that I know what she's doing. She knows what I'm doing, and we can look at the week. And if you guys got stuff going on, or I got something that's coming up, or someone's asking, "Hey, can we do this?" I need to look. And communication goes way, way up when we do that, and conflict goes way down. And we don't just throw things on the calendar without making some decisions about, is this, and a big question that I try to tell guys is, whatever's coming up, before I sign up for something new, the question is this best for our family right now? And because if it's not, it's just a good thing. It's just a good thing. I mean, right now, baseball and sports are super important in your family season. And so, you know what, but you all know, you all signed up for that. Mm-hmm. But if I said, "Hey, can we add another thing?" You'd go, it's not best for our family right now. And there are things that you have to say no to in order to make this happen. And so there's sacrifices along the way. But that's just super important. Take time off. I mean, it's crazy how much vacation time gets left on the table in men's lives because they just got to work hard and they haven't been mindful of it. There's a guy on staff. He's our campus pastor at Richmond. His name's Jason Kerner. He maps out like throughout the year his vacation. And so we're like, hey man, are you on vacation again? But he's been real strategic about these.
We've got a few people like that who have a real like intentional way of mapping out their vacation time throughout the year. Yeah, it's interesting.
I'm jealous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
It's really smart.
I'm like, man, I'm like, how many days do I have left? You know, it's like just trying to think that through. You know, every once in a while, leave a little early and go home and meet your family. You know, I mean, even if it's 30 minutes, it's like, dude, you're here. I'm like, yeah, I just want to get off, and that speaks so much value to your wife and your kids, and because you know that there's going to be moments where you're going to have to stay late, or you got to be on the phone about it. There just are things that happen, and then pay attention to the seasons of your life. We're in some ways in different seasons. I've got one that's older, and I've got two that are home. You've got you got a bunch that are in sports. You got all but one home, and you know you've got one that's a senior. You got one in. I mean, so you know when you're single or newly married and you have no kids, you can just pour the coals on, and then when you start getting babies and you get more than one, it's overwhelming. And just knowing, you know what, I need to sacrifice some stuff here. And even if it means I got to work later after we get kids down or whatever, if you've got that flexibility, take advantage of it. But pay attention to the seasons that you're in. I think that's super important. Nickell, and this is just a side thing, but you talk about trips and vacations. Will you tell them the difference real quick before we move on?
Yeah, the distinction between a trip and a vacation is the presence of your children. And I said that years and years ago.
And it doesn't mean you don't love them.
No, it doesn't. But it's funny how many people remember that from both Colorado and here, and especially young parents will always echo that back to me. And what I mean when I really explain that is if you bring vacation expectations to a trip that has your small children on it.
Yeah.
So if you're going, we'll call it the beach.
Bar better be low.
Yeah, you got a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. Let me tell you what it's not going to be. It's not going to be restful.
Just getting out to the beach.
Yeah, so much effort, you know. Yeah. So, but if you calibrate your expectations around, okay, this is a trip. We're doing this for our family, for our kids, but this is not for me.
Yeah.
You know, a vacation in that stage of your life is if it's supposed to fill you up, you might not want to put your kids on the plane to Maui that they won't remember.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was clarifying for me to go, if I bring the right expectations in, I'm way better off. And so what we've noticed as our kids have gotten older, Allie and I talk about this all the time, is our trips are so much more like vacations now.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to pack a diaper bag to go out to the beach, except for me, you know, so I don't have to go back in it. But
you have done a good job, though. You and Allie get away at times. I mean, you went to New York not that long ago. I mean, there are moments where you're real intentional about that. And I think that's really, it's important, you know.
Yeah, as we had more kids, we noticed that just because we went the first 10 years of marriage without ever doing anything like that. Yeah. And then when we did go on a vacation, just the two of us, after we had 3, we spent the first few days like sleeping and didn't realize, wow, we were tired. We were really tired.
Right.
We just learned like we might want to do this more than just once every 10 years. We might want to get away a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on that? Minimize distractions, evaluating current rhythms, and saying no. You both are pretty good at that in a lot of ways.
Saying no things.
And there's a lot of demands on both of you. A lot.
It's hard to say no because most of the things that come our direction are good things, you know, but we've both done this many times where you say yes to a bunch of really good things and then you're mad at yourself and you're upset. I overcommitted, you know. It's not that I can't do it. It's not that I can't do it. It's just that I'd rather be over here with them right now, you know. And so it's hard. You learn by doing it wrong, you know, and then you figure out what that balance looks like.
It's all about who you're going to disappoint.
Yeah.
You're going to disappoint somebody, so you get to decide on the front end of an invitation who you want to disappoint.
That's that's a really important question. Who do you want to disappoint here?
Yeah.
Neither of you are on softball teams.
I tried it once and hated it years ago. Things too slow.
I did with a bunch of lost guys in Seattle.
That's what I did in Colorado.
But I don't do fantasy football. Do you guys do fantasy football?
I've tried a couple times and I never make it through the first 3 weeks of the season. I forget to check the stupid thing.
Dude, you got to put so much time into that.
Yeah,
because you're not even watching one. You're not watching
And it's
one
technology.
team.
You and I don't have the technology.
and I'm falling asleep when I'm watching those football games, so I don't know what the point is.
Yes. You both are not on social media. No. Talk about that.
I'm just more and more grateful for it. It just I've started to realize how many people's actual real life interactions are dictated by things that have happened and have been said on social media, that without that, I'm just missing that whole thing, and I'm grateful for it. So there's less conflict, there's less drama, there's less worry, there's less anxiety. You know, I could keep on going. Yeah. So I'm grateful for it, and it helps me see other people in a way that is more pure. Like you said this in a sermon a little while back, like, I don't need to know what your political opinions are, your politics are, who you voted for, whatever. Yeah. So it helps me just see people in a more genuine way if I don't see what they're doing on social media.
Yeah, they don't know me and I don't know them. Yeah, but so that makes it fun. There's discovery in any relationship, and you actually get to know each other.
But it's an intentional thing for both of you.
Oh yeah, it's easy for me.
I mean, I have it, and I'm not on it a whole lot. I'm not even great at it, but it's one of those things where, man, it's such a time waster.
Yeah.
I mean, you just go down so many holes, you know?
Yeah, I started thinking about my kids long term, and so my kids aren't on social media, and that was a blessing because they were watching their mom and dad not be on it.
Right.
And I was on it for a little while because I was told around here I needed to be, and then I realized, man, this is a cesspool. This is really dark.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wanted to model for my kids that you'll be a healthy person, and you don't have to have. It doesn't mean it's an evil thing. It's not something that I value.
Well, there were 2 points of weakness for me. Again, it goes back to weakness. Years ago when I would preach, I would find myself sitting on my recliner, you know, on Sunday afternoon, looking at people's comments on my sermon and go, "There's nothing healthy about this."
No win.
Because if it's a great comment and I'm the best preacher they've ever heard, and that goes to my head and heart, that's not good for me. Yeah. And if it's a terrible comment and I'm the worst preacher who's ever lived, that's not helpful for me either. Good. So I just don't need it. And I recognized I just have a tough time avoiding that temptation to look at that. And so that was a weakness. The other weakness is I just really struggle with people thinking the wrong things, which makes social media the worst place you should ever go, because everybody who thinks the wrong things puts them on social media. Yeah. So why do I need to go expose myself to endless frustration?
Try to correct them. Hey, listen, this is not what whatever. Yeah, all of that, for sure. Evaluating rhythms. Again, seasons are different. Sometimes if we're not careful, the rhythms that we're in can become ruts. And so it's not a bad thing to look and put a pin in a month on a calendar 6 months from now. Let's just evaluate how this is going. You know, do we like this rhythm? Do I like what I'm doing here? Like, you've mixed up even just kind of when you work out, you know, and you take in the afternoon or toward the end of your work day, but you started really early. And so, but there's nothing wrong, you know, and seasons may even dictate some of that. I mean, you're walking in the cold in February, which was fine, but you may go, you know what, I'm gonna have to do this here because of weather or whatever that is, and just trying to think through some. But it's never a bad thing to just at some point go, hey, do I like the way that my life is going day by day, week by week, or even if it's just moving some of your meetings, or even how you do your meetings. Those things can be helpful too. Mixing some stuff up along the way and trying something different. You never know what might come from that.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So if it's not serving you, if it's not filling you up, you know, then you want to evaluate it. If it's not helping you, then change it.
We bled into family and marriage. There's no way to avoid that. What do you do consistently with your wives? Both your wives' names are Allison, and your kids. Think about just some things that you do, you know, whether it's in conversations or certain things, meals or whatever that is. What are some things that happen on a consistent basis in the Weece home and in the Nickell home?
Yeah, dinner time was always a high value for us when the kids were growing up. So it's a time for us to have face-to-face conversation. Me driving them to school was another interaction that was just a cherished moment in my past that I'll always love, you know, because I get them laughing before they got to school and pray with them a little bit. Now it's interesting, you know, with my daughter being at UK, we'll FaceTime at night before bed. That's and check in. How was your day? You know, and I look forward to that. Yeah. I really do. It's fun. Silas is different. You know, he's working a lot. So when he's around, we have great conversations But he's a pretty busy kid right now, so I don't get as much with him. But when I do, like last night, we had about an hour, and it was fun just to catch up. Alice and I eat together. You know, when our kids are not with us, that's a value for us, is we get that time together, and we're finding this new season of discovery again that we. It's just wonderful, man.
Yeah,
really,
it's not
wonderful.
like you neglected it and go, oh, there she is. You just have more space now because kids are more independent.
Right. Yeah, and there's a friendship there that I just value. And we're also pulling in other couples. So Wednesday night, one night a week, we take other couples out for dinner.
Right. That's cool.
Younger couples.
Swing by Arby's, get some curly fries.
Listen, you caught me twice last week. The only reason I went there is because it's so close to church.
Beef and cheese for the wife.
I just got these little chicken sliders, and he's wearing
some
me out
Arby's
about
sauce.
it.
Up
he
on
didn't take
thing.
it home. He throws away before he gets home.
Yeah, you know, we're in a weird spot because we got a 9-year-old.
Yeah,
you know, and then we got a 19-year-old, and so she's in college, and we cherish. Fortunately, it's right down the road, so I was having coffee with her yesterday because of finals week going on, and so I've just learned with her I have to be super intentional now to actually schedule things, put it in my calendar, take her out. So she asked me before she went off to school, which was really cool as a dad. She said, "Hey, can we try to schedule some once every week or 2 weeks, you know, coffee, lunches, that kind of thing?" So we've been doing that, and that's been really fun. You know, with the boys, I've always noticed, and this is just true for boys and men, like the shoulder-to-shoulder stuff works really well as far as conversations. So in the car while we're, you know, working out in the yard or, you know, things like that, just trying to be intentional, playing basketball in the driveway, having hard conversations at the end of a tough loss, you know, or, you know, that kind of thing. Those things happen all the time.
Friendship stuff, dating stuff.
With
Allie, the friendship piece from year 10 on, so we're year 23 now, and that has just grown exponentially. And so, like, we're in a season now where, during baseball season, when we get home, we've got about 15 minutes before we're just ready to go to bed, you know. But normally, outside of spring baseball season, you know, we try to get the kids to all vacate the premises, and we sit out there on the sofa and we'll watch a show or read or talk or whatever. And so we just really cherish that time together. And we really enjoy it, as boring as it sounds. You know, sometimes we set up date nights when we learned this when the kids were little. We don't want to pay a sitter, or we can't, or, you know, whatever it is. We'll just stay at home and watch a movie together, you know, and make some food together, that kind of thing, or bring food in.
Get them out of here.
But we used to put the kids in a playroom that we had in our old house back in Colorado. We go, you guys are having a sleepover in the playroom, and you're watching Disney movies, and we're out here on the sofa. So, you know, you just have to think about that stuff. But the cool thing is as you continue to grow in friendship, you don't have to think about it as much because you're jealous for it. Like, you want it. And so we've noticed that dynamic in our marriage. You know, we just really want it. And so the kids get frustrated with it sometimes. They always say, "Are you banishing us?" And we're like, "Yep, you're about 5 minutes from being banished. Get the heck out of here because I'm hanging out with her," you know.
I told guys Monday night, the best, outside of giving them a relationship with Jesus, the best thing that you can give your kids is what it looks like to see a healthy marriage with Jesus in the middle of it.
That's right.
And those meal times or the fighting for, again, not everybody can go. It's hard to find a babysitter sometimes, and sometimes running out is super expensive, especially in this season. But even if it means you just take a walk, or you really do put them somewhere else. We've put girls in our bed upstairs, and they're just on devices, and they're not going to be on forever, but they can. That means it leaves us alone. I love just catching up with her, and you know, I remember Bro telling me at one point, he said he and Debbie would go to Cracker Barrel on Fridays, and they'd go through these questions, and I tried them. And what I've learned is that doesn't work for us, but these questions may be helpful for a listener. They would sit down and they would go, "Hey, what's God been teaching you?" Second question is how are we doing? And he'd ask, "How am I doing?" And eventually, when you ask that question, eventually your spouse will go, well, "How am I doing? You know, what do you need to dial up, dial down? What do you need more from me? How are the kids?" And it's kind of about, where are they now? What's going on? How do we help them? What do we need to weed out of their life or seed? What's the next step? What do we need to focus in on? They look at their calendars and they check on their calendars. And he told me, and then they'd ask the question, "How can I pray for you?" And not that they're not aware of some of those things, but they made it a business meeting a little bit. And he said, I think once a month they talk finances too. But we have meetings for dumb things sometimes, and it's going, what if we just created some space? And sometimes it's just we're gonna grab a couple of those questions, on a Tuesday night, and then maybe Thursday and maybe Saturday morning we'll pick up some things. But regardless of when they happen, it's important that they happen, and just being able to be transparent with your spouse about your fears, frustrations, anything that's going on. I mean, sometimes what we do is we just want to cut it off completely, but you don't want to just dump your work out on people, but it's also part of your life. And if you don't do that, you'll rob them of who you are and what you do. And that's super important too. Anything with any of that before we move, kids. You redeem time in the car. You talked about redeeming time in the car too. And I try to do that as well. But you're going back and forth from practice to games and all of those things, and so you get a kid, you get a son in the car or whatever, and like even just some of the conversations you've had with Bo, I've had conversations with my two in the car, and there's something about that, but I think we don't necessarily think about it. We just kind of want to drown ourselves in, and sometimes we'll just jam to music, and that's fine. That's fun. But sometimes even just talk about maybe the redeeming the time in the car.
Yeah, I mean, I have to go to the car pickup line, fairly often and pick up two of the boys, Silas and Bo. And so I'll have one of them in the car for a while before we get the other, and then I'll have both of them in the car. Sometimes if I'm taking them to school, which I do every now and then, especially on weeks when I'm not preaching, I'll try to take them once a week or something like that. I just try to inspire joy, So the other day we were playing a Jim Gaffigan routine in the car, because they think it's all funny because they grew up in a big family and half his stuff's about having 18 million kids, So I'm trying to inspire joy, or I'm trying to ask questions, trying to show that I'm interested in their day. Sometimes we're all just depleted and tired, and we just listen to music, and that's it. And that's okay.
Yep.
But the consistency of it over time, that you get those moments.
Yeah. I helped develop similar thing, a sense of humor in my kids. I want them to laugh and have fun. So we did that. The other thing I see it as is an opportunity to educate my kids on stuff they're not going to learn at school. Yeah. So my parents did a good job of this. So we talk politics. I want them to know the ins and outs of how this works. We talk budgeting and finance stuff all the time. But I'm also talking to them about stuff that really matters, So I have a series of things I've walked my son through in the last 2 years because he's graduating. Did the same thing with my daughter. And so I've got one more big conversation, and I'm glad I get to have those conversations. And Allison gets to weigh in on those. She gets to say, hey, I think these are some things he needs to hear. Yeah. And he knows when those are happening because I let him know I'm not, springing it on him when he's at a moment where he's really tired, so we might take a trip or do something else where we can have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, we don't, sometimes I think in preachers or pastors' homes, I think they think that you guys just get up and crack open your notes and bring the production team over and you got some slides. It's just, a lot of it's informal. And it can also be inconsistent.
Yeah, if we could preach sermons that would change our kids' hearts, that'd be easy. You know what I mean? Like my kids know when I'm going into sermon mode or speech mode, or I'm trying to manipulate their heart with my words and things like that. It just doesn't work. Doesn't work on anybody,
And being able to connect with them even before you correct them, that's super important. Learn how to ask good questions about your kids. You all have boys. Of course, you've got Ava, but with my girls, they like to talk. But sometimes there for a while, it was like, hey, how was school? And if you ask that question, they're going to go, yeah, it was good.
Fine.
And it's going, hey, what was the best part of your day? Right. Or, hey, what were you most frustrated about today? Or, hey, did you meet a new friend today? Who did you hang out with today? What did you guys do? Asking these questions. And so I've got girls, and my youngest, Emmy, the other night, I'm not kidding you, we were sitting down on the couch for dinner, and we were like, all right, let's talk about our days. And Emmy just did not stop talking about her day. I'm like, I felt like we just lived every second of your day,
the whole day.
And I'm like, all right, that's awesome, babe. But hey, Evie, how about? And she's like, hey, Dad, and one more thing about my day. And I'm like, cool, that's awesome. All right, so listen, we gotta let Evie talk, And so, but the listening aspect of who we are too, being fully present, putting your phone down, shutting off the TV at times, taking advantage of those times, because if we don't look like we're present, engaged, then they'll go, you really don't care, or you are somewhere else. And even your wife to have enough wisdom to go, hey, why don't you go ahead and go? Because she doesn't want you to hurt that, and she doesn't, if we're going to be there, let's be engaged, and let's show them by our face and by the way that we listen. You already talked about listening. I think that's super important. And I tell guys, listen, the minute you stop listening is the minute that your kids will stop talking. And I don't ever want that to be the case, Super important. Last thing, hobbies. We kept you deep. You guys okay? Okay.
What is it, midnight? How long have we been going?
Hobbies. What do you guys do for fun? What fills you up?
I have two hobbies. I just said this to a group of men the other day. I read books and I lift weights. That's about it. And then I'm sitting watching my kid in a school play or watching my kid on a baseball field or that kind of thing.
Read books and hunt.
Mm-hmm. See, this is what I love about this is that it's simple. And when Paul talks about, hey, live a quiet life, a simple life, and I think we think it's just these. We see all these different people that are doing all these things. It's like reality TV in our lives wouldn't be all that.
Yeah.
Sensational. It's just we're just grinding. We got people to care about. We got things to do. We want to be as intentional with our time as we can. We want to narrow the focus, and we just want to enjoy what God gives us.
Yeah, my kids' hobbies were my hobbies.
Yeah.
Through middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, as men, you can gravitate towards things, but they just take on a life of their own, you know? So you got to be just really careful with that kind of thing where it's like, okay, well, you like to work on cars.
Yeah.
Okay, well, does that mean you're spending 4 hours a night in the garage at the expense of your family? That you got to be careful of that kind of thing. And so I walked through a season where it really bothered me when we lived in Colorado that I wasn't fishing, because we used to fish in Hickman Creek here.
Right.
My dad lived on that creek, so it's super easy to go down there and just go, hey, Pop, we're wading down in there.
Yeah.
On Colorado, they'll shoot you if you walk onto their creek at the wrong place, and it takes a lot of effort.
Sure.
And I was raising kids. It was like I was at this crazy fast-paced church, and I was raising kids. I didn't have time to go fishing, so I had to let myself off the mat because I actually felt like I was doing something wrong. Like, you live out here, you should be fishing all the time. Like, no, you can fish in heaven. And that's literally the way I thought about it was we're going to get to do a lot of this stuff in heaven. In the meantime, there's work to be done and there's families to be loved. And so,
Yeah, absolutely. I work out and I love to laugh. And so if there's ever anything I can listen to that's podcast or whatever, we're going to do one coming up called Laugh Hard. The three of us just telling stories about how much of an idiot we've been.
It may not make it to, but we'll enjoy it.
I need to think about that one.
but like even comedians, it's like you just went and saw Seinfeld not too long ago. I've seen Nate Bargatze. You just talked about Jim Gaffigan. It's just there's something about laughter, and I'll be honest with you, I love laughing with you guys. We took a trip yesterday and we laughed a lot. Mm-hmm. I love it when I've got tears running down my eyes because my wife and I are laughing about something, Or the other day she saw some guy that she just said, "Hey," she said, "There's your." I don't know what she said. It's something I would normally say. But she's like, "Hey, is that your is that your brother over there?" And it was this guy that just looked really, really. It sounds. We should take that out anyway. But she looks to make me laugh. I love to make her laugh. What a gift that even in creation for laughter, I don't know obviously in day 6 when we were created, but man, what a gift that is just to be able to laugh and enjoy what God has given us. And so, I don't know. I think that's a lot. Anything else? Just want to wrap up because I know you guys got to get out of here. You probably got a baseball game to get to, I'm sure. And you got to go hit Arby's.
Listen, I'm never going to be able to live that down.
Hey, listen, you might get some Arby's from
Curly
people.
fries coupons are coming your way.
Anything else just in rhythms, habits, routines? Just begin to look at your own life and evaluate and just see what God is doing in the midst of it. I think that's super important. Creating healthy rhythms and routines help you narrow the focus. It helps you become really intentional, and you can be successful at the right things. And I think that's super important. If you're able to do this in a way where you have healthy rhythms, then all of a sudden life becomes a lot more sustainable and fruitful. So, man, thank you guys for coming.
Absolutely.
Thanks, brother.
We kind of landed the plane pretty quick, but we've been covering a lot of ground. But we'll have another one-on-one or one-on-two in a couple weeks. That'll be fun as we kind of wrap up this series of Locker Room in the midst of. Hey Zach, can we do that again? I'm now burning the
your blood sugar's getting low.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
I may need something. All right. Hey, we're going to have you guys back on in a couple weeks, and we're going to wrap up toward the end of this season of Locker Room before the summer hits with something that'll just be fun, laugh hard. But if this podcast has helped you, I'd love to hear from you. If we can help you take a step, if there's anything that you've got going on that we as a church can assist you in, we'd love for you to reach out to us at lockerroom@southland.church. we'd love to be able to help you in any way. And also, as always, if this podcast has helped you, I'm sure that there's some other men that are wrestling through rhythms, and this could be real practical and insightful application for them to begin to think about their own lives too. That could be really, really helpful. So, as always, share it if you got it. It'd be helpful. We'll catch you next time on Locker Room.